All right, I'm going to be reading one of Forrest's essays that he's left on his website. Um, it's interesting that he's devoted his entire MFLB website to this topic of AGI, and so yeah, let's check out one of these essays. And the one that I have in mind to start with is future visions. And most of his essays are kind of about the critiques of why this AGI idea is dangerous. Um, so this is Forrest's vision. This is called My Vision of the Future by Forrest Landry. It was written November 16, 2022. Abstract. As a counterpoise to how the future could be conceived of rather than, and as an alternative to, the transhumanist, long-term, total utilitarianism. Text. Do you have a positive vision for the future? Well, yes, I actually do. My positive vision of the future is a kind of hybrid of the best elements of our past and the best elements of our present. We have in the world already all of the things that we would ever need to make a beautiful future. One where people are prosperous and thriving, where people are generally happy, where health is happening, so people can really be in their experience of life and enjoying that for its own natural own sake. I'm not trying to describe some sort of utopia. I do not think that is a good idea. I think that most of the time, if you're hearing people describe something that sounds too utopian, there is a problem. It is probably a cult. It's some sort of marketing scam or spin on something that people are trying to hide, some sort of extractive process. If it looks like marketing hype, or if anywhere you see anything that might look like it's marketing or hype, then it probably is marketing hype, which means it is not in your interest. Be warned. How do we get it to the point where people are relating to one another in a manner that the action of each person is actually to the interest of the other? Doing so is actually in everybody's interest. There are some real skills that are broadly on everyone's part when thinking about positive future visions and recognizing the value of the present, and when recognizing the value of the present. There is definitely at least some effort that is needed to be put into articulating those skills and describing such communication emphasis and intention in real ways. When a person is healthy, when they're healthy in their body, they do not mind being an animal. That is, they do not mind being human. There a profound sense of enjoyment and peace and value in just the sheer gracefulness that one can happen in one's own body when it is healthy. When things flow smoothly, when a person motions both in their minds and when everything else around them, when they are adapted to the environment that they are in, and when the environment is graceful with respect to them too, then there is true beauty. I think that there is a very low level. I think there is a very low level premise here when we were talking about the utopian approach, as transhumanism, machine minds, etc., is that I am presupposing as a notion of the vision of the future that there is a true embodied health, a health realized in the land and the community and the people and the families, all of that. And to really have that, to be kind of a focus which enables people to be more satisfied and joyful and healthy, for them to just genuinely be comfortable being in their natural organic animal state. In this, the notion of the organic happens to be something that is good. And it is a good way to characterize key aspects of this vision of a healthy organic future. This is in explicit contrast with the sort of inorganic hypothesis that transhumanism keeps leaning into. For example, consider some earlier movies as holding some of the transhumanist visions. We watched the Star Trek motion picture last night. That movie features an extremely illustrious vision of how technology is taking us into space. It presents a soft vision of military command, one deeply emotive and humanizing, while still maintaining a chain of command. That spacecraft are fast and capable, and people work hard and work together. and are skillful in navigating communication with their own emotional integrity. And things are interesting. There's a profound sense of hopefulness, of inspiration, of value of the human, of value of the human, and of the cultures and ways of life. The inclusiveness is taken for granted, and there is no suggestion of anyone exploiting anyone else at all, no economic processes at all. There is even this incredible suggestion that technology can transcend itself, that people can be more than machines, that the main culmination of the movie is this event where a guy merges with a machine and that whole package transcends being itself in the movie. The whole thing just disappears in some emanation of light and enlightenment. It's a vision of glory and total epiphany. It's the rapture of the machine in some kind of pseudo-hypersexual union with the divine as the ultimate of logic and feeling and emotion. All of the surfaces of the ship are clean and zen, no mess, no fussiness, no irrelevant details. It is, in a way, the perfective autism environment. No wonder that technologists and geeks everywhere tend to love the Star Trek series. But the humans were humans and the machines were machines. And except for the ultimately idolized merger, which happens only once, all prior instances were a kind of death with a hint and a suggestion of a transcendence of death. Who could not want that? In effect, this movie is something of the exact bias of how transhumanism and artificial long-termism became some sort of total utopian dream hype. That the language of it, via Bostrom and Kurzweil, has been grounded in the sort of science fiction vision of the future that is presented in this movie. Except that behind the scenes, implied at the margins, that it is the technology that benefits and not the organic humans. Look at how much of this sort of thing benefits the technology companies. Their representatives, knowingly or not, have spun the various science fiction representations into various marketing campaigns for technology companies to prosper so as to build the future. Look at all the implied marketing that Elon does, putting together SpaceX or Tesla. He glorifies technology as the solution to all problems. So you can see where the transhumanist, synthetic, sterile, and virtualized value of the machine technology civilization, with long-term, total utilitarian, potential visions of the future are coming from. It's a perfect storm of sales and marketing. First, it appears in science fiction and in San Francisco, then in layers of marketing, and of the ever-increasing hype cycles that are oriented around the particular neurological biases and proclivities of the sorts of types of people who tend to be scientists and engineers. Engineers, autistic spectrum people generally, are people who actually really want to do good, who join movements like effective altruism and attempt to do and achieve the actually impossible. For examples of the kinds of things that geeks and quiet types tend to focus on in order of their occurrence in history include to make the philosopher's stone, to build a perpetual motion device, and to implement AGI and geeks, scientists, and engineers of all types are often, due to their own needs of life and home, are taken into the service of the rich elite, of those that are not at all concerned with the public good, the environment, and the commons value. Though they, like any king, pretend to be while simply living high above the law, dining on the resources of others, taking away their choices, consuming, killing, etc. Engineers and scientists are generally people who want to do good things in the world and to actually be in the service of humanity, to be worthy of respect and honor and prestige by doing the great and worthwhile hard things, making the vehicle and craft of human progress, like the Star Trek Enterprise ship with its command staff above and the engineering team below working together to do great things. They, by being the natural beneficial way that they are also specially vulnerable to the depredations and deceptions and delusions set up by the dark triad types moving among them. Little do those engineers and scientists know that they are being used by these other people, the nar-social, the owners, the bosses, the executives, the venture capitalists, the Wall Street speculators, ones who tend to not ever make anything themselves, or to do anything, or to actually write or develop anything new. They use and take credit for the work of somewhat more anonymous ambient others. except insofar as needed to actually manipulate to make glossy sales videos extolling the benefits of some new product, service, or financial thing. The Narsocial use science fiction imagery of the things like the Jetsons and the notions of Star Wars, where robots are cute and no one ever sees any actual blood, gore, or wanton destruction. It's all mostly spiritual and mostly painless to promote their own hidden agendas, ones of extraction and power and profit. The Narsocial dark triad types have much less value for life, their own or others, and are actually quite selfish, even while pretending to be, and are for sure signaling of, generous and magnanimous as leader of the people, etc. They are the ones who play games, not on computers virtually, harmlessly, but in the real, actual world, where with other people as involuntary participants, with their very lives, health, and well-being, and in the politics of power, and in economics, and in war. Even life itself is used as a weapon. Pandemics, and as an extractive extortion, biotech and pharmaceuticals. The Narsocial living only in the private self-satisfaction of moment, thinking not of the future at all, or of the rights and choices of others, think only of acquisition of social power, attempting to climb to the top, no matter how many broken lives, lost savings, you want to buy some crypto, and the maybe bodies that they have leave behind, ones too emotionally or physically traumatized to ever be able to make unconstrained choices again. Human beings will not prosper from these outcomes. Fortunately, it is, with some few exceptions, actually unlikely, for simple practical reasons, for the vast majority of the TUA agenda to be actually realized in the real world. The major problem is what happens in the interim. Due to the cult followers of Bostromism end up killing everyone and everything in total planetary and permanent toxicity over their zealous, arrogant, and over-the-top obsessive-compulsive unending attempts to implement their worldwide perfective security state so that they can then, with impunity and answerable to no one for nothing, then replace all actual humanity and life with some few super-elevated, hyper-elite, superior race of radically enhanced post-humans, the ones who can afford all of the ultra-expensive, gatekeeper-managed cyborg prosthetics and neural uplinks. Do the dictators and their lackeys win? Or is it maybe the case that the engineers, the scientists, and become savvy to the marketing hype of the Narsocial among them and elect to do the right thing and reject the notions of the artificial delusion of panacea utopia, and to elect to cooperate with real people on real problems in the real world to the benefit and health of everyone in all ways and all modes of being? The visions of Bostromism are not at all realistic. They are pure deception, perfect images of seduction based on pseudo-moral arguments that have no merit. They depend on aspects of computer science that simply do not work in physics or math. Examples include things like computronium and hyperdrives, virtualized consciousness, etc. Such visions depend on ideas of artificiality that actually ignore complete life cycles of all aspect, ignoring all manner of side effect and toxicity that make such things impractical and immoral in the long term, despite the also equivocation of the very meaning of signaling long-term interest in the actual well-being of actual organic life, healthy and emotionally integrated people. Instead, we as humanity can get better at integrating and working with the truths of the organic, of the wisdom and joy of life. That the realistic part of our future action is to really get good at doing the organic, at integrating diverse sources of wisdom into a natural and healthy whole ecosystem of process, one in which the smallest and largest are equally involved in being in their very essence, that we can have conclusions sustainable evolution using what is already available with the resources and technology that we already have today developed. For example, the internet already works. Making it faster simply makes it easier for advertising and marketing executives to take advantage of people's natural biases for more high-intensity social signaling in the form of more flashy videos delivered more quickly and voluntarily at higher complexity than anyone can moderate, let alone understand. That the costs and consequences of simply more in the space of the inherent increases of complexity have a diminishing and marginal return on investment, and eventually the entire Ponzi scheme runs down. Tainter wrote about this in The Collapse of Complex Civilizations, and others have written about the symptoms of this insofar as the costs borne by the public eventually exceed the carrying capacity of the extraction tax based maintaining them. So when I think of my preferred future vision, it begins by imagining all of the thoughtful people around the world becoming very savvy to all the kinds of social manipulation games that they have been inadvertently entangled with, and rejecting all of the cultist type, the distorted arguments of virtual value and technological civilization, the false potential and technological inevitability of AGI, as all simply being temporary and now ended manifestations of just the obsessions of the very few, as people which can now safely be ignored, overtly, obviously, publicly, as such fake values as no longer the implicit background driver of what matters in the actual real world. Once that overall background level of discernment has been increased, and the deception decreased to the point of actual polite effectiveness, then maybe we can think in ways that are not just intelligent and sensitive, but also tend to be integrative of wisdom, of emotional integrity and health, both inside our own selves and spirit, but also in our communications, in our treatment of each other, that we could potentially all have actual real situational awareness of what matters, rather than the forever broken proxy of some single metric dashboard app. Maybe from there, with the actual care and compassion and consideration embodied in diverse conscientiousness, that our skill of being in and with actual community and commons of a healthy, organic, natural, wild, and wonderful life, thriving in a concert with all of the ecosystem of the lands and environment surrounding in beauty and grace and dynamic motion, that many of us would even have a sense of humor. This is not a tame vision, but an alive one. And it is practical, more practical and vital than anything that can be done with mere machines, made of metal and silicon and plastic wires. I have a vision that by knowing the difference between fake forms of virtualized social processes, institution, and real forms of embodied living process, community, that we can, most of us, all actually know and prefer the healthy being and become of the latter, and to disfavor everywhere and always the former, that we can have actual healthy culture, and from there, in a distributed way, a discovery of values, and from that, maybe in time, an attunement and keen discernment, the evolution of a dream, a vision for what the community really wants and feels, very much most alive with. That in realizing the vision, with also a distributively evolved communal strategy of collective manifestation, and that maybe also we could find within that sustainable communal health. This is kind of where my leanings go to preferentially. It's significant contrast to the usual Bay Area method, where some single person has a strategy to misuse vision to manipulate people, friends, family, and angel investors to then invest to continue the one person strategy to use vision to manipulate even more people, executives, staff, to make some product or service, and then marketing and sales, which further implement the strategy of vision, manipulating the culture of the public so as to shift their behavior to compel them to buy or to vote differentially, or to otherwise act in a way that is not actually in their service. Singleton strategy over vision over culture. All forms of unending monism is the way of death. Only by following the path of life, of culture before values, and vision before the strategy of the many may we maybe sometimes have life. There's a lot that can be accomplished in this way right now, which depends on nothing so much as our organized respect for one another's mutual choices and the skills thereof as ones together. There are no fake contingencies. We are already human, and we can already allow ourselves to know what that means. No new technologies have to be invented. We can already make what we have work for us, for life rather than against us, against life. We do not need new markets or new financial things or new anything, really, in technology. There is no need to productize, sell, or buy. It does not have to be implicitly weaponized via being converted into a narrative, politicized, which can be broadcast by thought police leaders. The only people who will object to this plan of no plan are those who are seeking to take something away from you. Beware of that. We can choose to reject artificial and the virtual, the fake values, the fake money in favor of the real values, the real choices and real lives, real people you know. And not only are those things accomplished in a real, reasonable, straightforward way, but they are accomplished in ways that are genuinely actually good. Not just what looks good, flashy, shiny, hype, utopias, or feels good, lots of sugar, addiction, and drugs, that we can understand what is good and what that means, and moreover, what we can actually know how to achieve this state of health and vitality. It does not necessarily require us to be doing impossible things like inventing ever more techniques for convincing fake signals of safety by adverse artificial intelligence agents. So in the interim, that means I have a vision that I will not be alone in the space of fighting the delusions of the vocal and very well-funded minority attempting to take over the whole world and make it a better place for them and not for all of us, for anything else that is alive. This involves many people noticing the real and actually taking the hype out, getting real, actually getting people to recognize the hype as hype, and the power to politics as politics of fear, and to elect amongst all of that to always choose love over fear. To simply stop feeding the wolf, the predators, the ones who take and never give anything back except maybe loss and hope and delusion. Loss of hope and delusion, toxic risk and disease and death for all that comes after. That we all need to get back to what we actually care about, what we love, to real human thriving in natural and organic ways, and ways of respecting life, of one another. What we care about, what we do, what we care about, what we do, what we love, what matters. I don't know. That's a confusing sentence. And thus, to be emphasizing of doing the things that supports what actually matters, supporting the thriving of life on this planet. So yeah, I have a positive vision for the future. It's one that incorporates a sense of humility rather than one of compulsion, control, and domination. One that supports the beauty of the natural wild rather than some pristine and prissy domestication. Visions of the future do not need to be grand. They need to be humble and homey. They can be humble and homey and still be real. And this is a kind of litmus test too. If somebody is put off by the humility, if they simply cannot see the value of this vision of thriving life and embodied health, then that is something of a warning. If they are put off by these concepts, then perhaps they are suffering some sort of disease of the soul, an unwillingness to accept the actual truths of life, that maybe they have an absence of wisdom, and that they prefer their own benefit and to the exclusion of others, to value the present over the future, or the extreme future over the present, as all sort of some justification of extreme and unwarranted risky actions, ones that benefit their feel-good in the moment at the expense and harm of everyone else. People put off by humility and groundedness and embodiment and communication are not in the right state and not in real relationship with other people. These are the things to be mindful of as we start thinking about conversations. We are wanting to track the kinds of dynamics that emerge in conversations with people in regards to what do you really want? The overall bottom line is something like be comfortable in your own true organic and animal nature, your own feelings and intuitions that's integrating of real wisdom and wholeness and in the true wholesome health and dynamic vitality in person and in community and land and environment as much as your curiosity, enthusiasm, inventiveness, and intellect as to be applied to solving real and interesting commons problems. That this is not a rejection of the artificial but a temperance of it, an unwillingness to accept that long-term toxicity in favor of expediency. And if you notice that someone is fundamentally uncomfortable with their own actual organic nature, if they're continually trying to hide in and descend into technology, power, money, gaming, addiction, such that they have hopes and dreams of maybe someday abandoning it all and giving up on everyone else and everything else as a kind of scorched earth policy so that they can have the false hope of upgrading or uploading their organic natural physicality so that they can become a higher class of the more eugenically perfect elite and maybe continue to seek to argue towards all of the rest of the worst of transhumanist long terminating total value of the potential future bullshit long scam. If they think that being the con or using the con or even unconsciously maybe as directed by others and arguing so is actually a good idea, then you can know for certain that they are for sure actually profoundly uncomfortable in their own skin. That they want to remove all possible skin in the game and absent and negate their own very ground of being. that within their own lost soul they are in such pain at such a level and so totally traumatized that such ridiculous visions and action that seem indicated in the transhumanist technological inevitability marketing agenda, to the degree that any of this even remotely seems like a good idea to them, that you can know for sure that they are also just truly lost. Do not count on such people for guidance. The only way that you can really play in life is to have skin in the game, to actually be real, to be sex positive rather than tech positive. People operating from within a traumatized mind tend to fear the rights and choices of others, and to disrespect the choices of others. They tend to weaponize everything to set up markets, gatekeeping, rent-seeking, seek social power and control, conditioning, bundling, taking, as a kind of theft of the future for their present. All of the artificiality and virtuality and the unending rapacious greed and the seeking of power and control and domination and anger and fear, it all represents some form of inner trauma, represents a real harm that has happened and still happening, or still happening as one mistake of conflicts begets another mistake of conflict. That reason is being used as a tool of the unreasonable. That those are reasonable are being used by and deceived, unwittingly seduced by those that have no reason other than themselves. That all of this will need to be addressed, or at least limited, boundaried somehow in life. That which does not sustain life will not eventually continue to live. We as community will need to heal somehow to restore our own real skin in the great game. We simply do not want and cannot allow our future choices in crisis to be made by those who are most fearful, the most traumatized, and therefore the actually least wise and the least cool. This is where a heart boundary needs to be created, a kind of protectiveness that is respecting of everybody's right of embodied and living choice, now and into the future, honoring and acknowledging the sacredness of the real and the natural wild. And there are real and practical techniques and skills to do so, that we could much more easily make use of, more easily than any tech that we could ever potentially, in principle, invent. That by being in skillful attunement and at one-ment with the actual vitality and flow of life, that we could all could continue to live and live together in true and trusted community. That is where my emphasis would be on in regards to what my vision of the future would actually be. Amen. So yeah, that was Forrest Landry's essay called My Vision of the Future. He's devoted his website to addressing artificial intelligence, and I think he has some really interesting perspectives. So yeah, this is one of the readings I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing about a dozen of them. So yeah, stop by for the next one.